Hi again. This is Nick Mann with the third installment, reading from my novel. The novel is Forgetful. It's published by the Strategic Book Publishing and Rights Company of Houston, Texas, released in September 2013. In the first installment here on my YouTube channel, I read sections of the book dealing with the central theme of the book, which is dementia and Alzheimer's, and Ben's fear of that he might be next in a family where Jillian Parks, his mom, is already on the track and progressing through the stages of dementia and Alzheimer's. In the second edition, I read from portions of the book on Ben and his family. Ben and his wife Addie, Ben and his sons Tony and Rico, and also on Ben, the organization development consultant, and an episode on a consulting assignment with a local government agency grappling with issues of childhood obesity in the city of Washington, D.C. In this third episode, I want to highlight a couple of things. One is Ben growing up, and also Ben and the city of Washington, D.C., and the urban life that he has experienced as he has grown up in the city. Before I start, as I've done in each of the other two segments, I want to read a couple of short reviews or statements about the book from previous readers. This first one is from BK in Luray, Virginia. Your depiction of Ben Parks, his hopes, joys, and the brutally honest details of his vulnerabilities. Wow. That's nice. Here's one from DC in Sarasota, Florida. You write as if you were talking with me face to face, the hallmark of a great writer. The plot unfolds easily, the characters very human, and it's a wonderful DC travelogue. And lastly, this is from EC, who posted on BarnesandNoble.com. This author has connected important personal and universal issues of the day in a compelling narrative that entertains as it enlightens, for anyone who just likes a good read. So thank you for anyone who's read the book and cares to post or send me directly any kind of review or thoughts about the book. I really appreciate that. I want to get right into it. And so I'm going to start. On the issue of Ben growing up. And this first episode that I'm going to read from doesn't really occur in D.C. It's from much earlier in Ben's childhood, but it is a depiction of even in his early days, having issues of forgetfulness. Selma, Alabama, summer 1953. Little Benjamin Parks and all the cousins were sitting on the front yard part of the wraparound porch on Hayden Street. His granddad, a deacon at the Tabernacle Baptist Church and the first black ever hired at the paper mill outside of town, had just come in, tired from work. Granddad didn't ever say a word. He just nodded at the children and went inside. Ben and cousin Ralphine, a tomboy, had challenged each other to a watermelon seed spitting contest. Penny was trying to get into it. She couldn't get the seeds off the porch when she tried. Cousin Ralphine was actually pretty good for distance, and she and Ben matched each other, spit for spit. Aunt Clay from inside the house called Ben to come inside. Ben's mom, Jillian, and Aunt Nellie were knitting by the old RCA Victor radio. This parlor and this radio had been the neighborhood place for listening to Joe Louis fights back in the 1940s, for listening to President Roosevelt's fireside chats, for listening to the news about the end of the war, and then about President Truman's order to end segregation in the military. Aunt Nellie, Jillian Stoddard's youngest sister, was the only daughter in the family who was still unmarried. But she was gorgeous and had a lot of suitors. The latest one was known as Mr. Herman. Herman Tyndale sat in the parlor holding forth about his war exploits as Aunt Nellie, chaperoned by the vigilant Jillian, listened with rapt attention. But Aunt Clay was working and getting ready for the afternoon influx of customers. You got to go gather some eggs. Now, young man, you scoot out back and get some of those eggs out that coop. The neighbors will be coming by, and we don't have a thing to sell. Take that pail and get to stepping. There's got to be 3 pails worth by now. So go ahead. Ben had looked at his mom, Jillian, for relief. Do as Clay says, Ben. Go ahead. Dejectedly, Ben grabbed the pail and went out back to the chicken coops. He'd done this many times. They always cackled and made all kinds of racket when he came out. This was one of his chores every summer when he visited his grandparents and family for 8 weeks in the summertime. I want to be out spitting Cousin Ralphine, he thought. Her last seed landed at least a couple of feet past my best, and if left to stand, she'll never let me live it down. He put down the pail to open up one of the coops. The chickens screamed. He turned and forgot the pail. Then he forgot why he was out there. He stopped and tried to concentrate. What am I doing out here with all these screaming chickens, he thought. Behind the fence, he spotted the 2 roosters. He was deathly afraid of one of them. That speckled rooster had chased Ben and cornered him. On that previous occasion, his granddad had thrown a rock and the rooster retreated after 5 or 6 pecks. But though they couldn't get to him now, Ben still froze at the sight of those roosters. What possessed him to be out in this chicken coop? After a time, Aunt Clay came out to the back step. You should have brought in at least 1 bucket by now, Ben. What's taking you so long? Ben looked back at her. Jillian stepped out beside her sister on the porch. Mr. Herman had left, and Jillian's duty was over in the parlor. Jillian immediately recognized what was wrong from her son's expression. She walked out to the chicken coop and found the pail. She held it up, and Ben suddenly remembered. He started scooping up eggs. One immediately broke. Take your time, Ben. Jillian was placing 2 eggs softly in the pail. Take your time. She and Ben collected 1 pail full and delivered it, then 3 more. Aunt Clay already had customers coming on the side of the house where the makeshift sales operation took place every afternoon. So that's a flashback, and I should tell you that in these segments on my YouTube channel, I'm not reading in the same order that some of these scenes appear in the book. I'm reading pretty much chronologically here, but in the book they are flashbacks and flash forwards, and so I just thought I should tell you that. So next I want to go to scenes, a couple of scenes that come sometime later, and now the family, this is the summer of 1959, and the family lives in D.C. At the crack of the bat, the smallest rookie shortstop from Venezuela, Zoilo Versalles, was off to his right. Diving horizontally, he simultaneously hit the ground as his outstretched glove made contact with the seeing-eye grounder that had momentarily been a surefire hit to bring in the tying run. Versalles acrobatically rolled over from his knees, threw a rope to Billy Consolo, the covering second baseman, for the forced third out. This preserved the one-run lead for the home team in the ninth inning. The exploding crowd, first silent and unbelieving, was jubilant at the rare win for the Washington Senators. I'm going to skip a little bit. March 3rd, 2006. Talking on the telephone with his dad, Ben asked, "What's going to happen with Soriano?" Without a pause, Richard Parks replied, "He's going to play left field. He might not know it yet, but he's messing with an old-time manager who isn't going to have players trying to dictate where they will or won't play." "Have you ever seen Soriano play second base, Dad? It's not a pretty sight," said Ben, agreeing with his dad's sentiment. "Frank Robinson was a gold glover. He's not going to have that mess in his infield." The father and son chuckled together on this, one of their many baseball commiserations over the years. There were a lot of things that Ben and Richard Parks couldn't or didn't dare talk about. They were from very different generations, with very different views on in many ways. But beginning when Ben was a very young boy, Richard Park had transferred to his son a passion for baseball. The national pastime had become a kind of glue in their relationship that had lasted and never failed. Let's skip just a little bit more. Smart man on the phone for BP, teased one of his hall mates. "Better get your dumb ass out of bed and talk to your daddy." Now Ben is in college now, and this is a call from his dad in about 1968. Ben had immediately tensed. Riots had torn up his hometown just after Dr. King was gunned down in Memphis. The unrest had permeated the scene at Middle State, but not to the extent of the torn-up buildings and streets back in D.C. Coming out of his room in a robe and running down the hallway, Ben expected bad news. He picked up the phone dangling against the wall at the end of the hallway. Several hallmates observed his conversation from a few feet away in the hall with concern on their faces. "What's wrong, Dad?" blurted Ben. His dad's reply was, "Hondo just hit his 10th home run in 7 days." Completely caught off guard, Ben was speechless. After more silence on the line, his dad had softly said, "Just wanted you to know the news isn't all bad back here. Are you studying, son?" "Yes, sir," said Ben. Then, "Oh, Hondo, the Senators. He did what?" 10 home runs in 20 ABs, said his dad. get back to the books, Ben. That was the whole conversation, a call to his college student son from Richard Parks to share Frank Howard's exploits on Ben's beloved last-place Senators baseball team. And a similar call happened a few months later, as Ben stayed in summer school to finish the last class he needed for graduation. This time, Ron Hansen, the Senators' shortstop, just to let you know what that was, I lived down on the water in waterfront in D.C., and the tour boats take off from the pier right behind us. So that's what you just heard. This time, Ron Hansen, the Senators' shortstop, had pulled off an unassisted triple play. 38 years later, thinking back on this episode, something struck Ben as funny for the first time, and he said, "In neither call did I even bother to ask Dad if the Senators won or lost the game." Okay, so we're moving forward now in time. Well, actually, I guess we're really not. We're going back and forth just the way the book does. I want to take us now back to 1959 and introduce you to Davita Sheridan, who is one of a gaggle of 5 or 6 or 8 people who started out together as kids in elementary and junior high school, grew up through high school, and have stayed together and remained together as friends for all the years that the book takes place. This particular episode has been a fun thing for some of the people who've read the book to talk about. I don't necessarily read some of the more juicy parts of the book in my live readings, and I'm not going to do that on YouTube. I will lead up to some areas, but I'm not going to go all the way through it. But you probably will get the idea of what's about to happen. So this is 1959. Ben Parks and Davita Sheridan had moved from junior high to high school at Harrison Tech. After their episode the previous year, Ben had withdrawn from Davita, and Davita had consciously worked to keep the lines of communication open. Eventually, they resumed walking home together occasionally, though Ben never stopped to come into the Monroe Street house on his way home. On the first day up to the high school near the Eckington Yards the next year, Davita and Ben boarded the trolley on Rhode Island Avenue together, and then met after the school to ride back home together. On the ride home, Davita leaned over and whispered, "You're coming home with me." Suddenly, Ben felt a squeezing in the pit of his stomach. He breathed deeply to relax. Then another part of his anatomy woke up. He looked at Davita as they came to their stop. She took his hand, and they disembarked. Standing on the sidewalk, he tugged his hand free and looked in the direction of Brentwood Road. Davita grabbed his hand back and said, "Ben, you're the nicest boy I know. I want to have sex for the first time, and I want to have it with you." She was 16 now, just a few weeks older than Ben, and quite a looker. She'd always been one of the cutest girls wherever she was. "Okay," said Ben. So I'm going to skip just a little bit here, and this is another incident later that week. "You're coming home with me again after school on Thursday. That will give you tomorrow and Wednesday to get ready." That's enough for that little segment. And I think I won't continue with that little episode anymore, but I will fast forward into adult life, and Davita is a grown woman and Ben is a grown man, and they are, as they are wont to do, meeting during the day at the bar that she runs on Upper Georgia Avenue near Walter Reed Hospital. So Ben is there sitting at the bar. Davita is behind the bar, and they're having conversation. Sipping on a dark Guinness draft, perfectly chilled but not cold, Ben had listened without comment as Davita Sheridan Ferrier continued confiding. Ben, I really hadn't expected to go through high school with you as my only one. I thought we weren't ever going to talk about this, said Ben, breaking out into a broad smile. That was then, and this is now, wise guy, said Davita. I got something to say, so don't interrupt me again. Ben raised his beer mug for a refill. Davita took it over to the tap and came back to lean on the bar in front of him. She was really gorgeous, thought Ben. Continuing as though the interruption had never occurred, Davita said, sometimes I would see you and think about whether you and I should get together again. But I was so driven to do my thing, and you didn't seem serious enough about the books for me. Ben feigned a protest, and Davita cut him off. Don't you even try to deny you were trifling in high school, Benjamin Parks. I'm going to skip down just a little bit. She went on, but I didn't think you were going to be anything after a while. The shame is that everybody knew you were smart, except for you. When you went away to college, I just hoped you would buckle down, but then I met Jackson and I stopped thinking about you altogether. Davita didn't need money, and she didn't need work. She worked up at the dance a lot because that's what she'd always done. Eventually, she took over running it and changed the name to Davita's. She could have sold it or just closed it up anytime she wanted and would have never been worse for the wear. But out of love and honor of her parents and grandparents who started up the dance a lot with almost no front money, Davita had kept the place open. After you came back from the Army and walked into my bar one day, I took one look at you, Ben, and knew you had changed. What was that? Maybe 1972 or 73? I was so proud of you. So you see how this thread of friendship starting when they were kids is continuing into adulthood. Let me go ahead, and now I want to skip to here, and we're back in Davita's bar, and this is in the summer of 2005, and I think obviously my friends, but probably some readers don't necessarily know that there's a version of swing dance that we do here in Washington, D.C., and we don't call it swing dance, we call it hand dancing. But this section I want to read, and this will be the last section I'll read in this third episode. I'm going to read about hand dancing at Davita's place. One Thursday evening in February 2006 at Davita's, Ben watched from the bar as a uniformed female doctor, a major, known to be a trauma surgeon at Walter Reed, finished her steak meal over at one of the tables. She downed her apple juice and then jumped up alone on the dance floor to a classics Temptation song that Old School had just started playing, The Way You Do the Things You Do. On a total spur-of-the-moment thing, Ben had joined her on the dance floor, and at some point Old School blended the temps down and went right into Chuck Brown's Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing, the funky go-go remix of the classic Duke Ellington tune. Old school to new school funk. Ben and the Major didn't miss a beat on the dance floor. The two of them swung across the floor as if they'd been dancing together for years. Theirs was the locally grown DC version of swing dancing, known as hand dancing. I'm going to skip just a little and let's see. Everyone in the bar had stopped to watch, and after they had stopped, Homie lumbered onto the dance floor on his new prosthetic left leg. "Show me some of those moves, Bebop," said Homie. Without hesitating, Ben had transferred the female doctor's hand into that of Homie. She stepped to him with a wide smile, and Old School didn't miss a cue. The DJ faded the music and came back up with the moderate tempo number by Luther Vandross, "I'm Only Human," very suitable for a beginning dancer. Ben coached Homie, who had already mimicked the 6-step count he'd seen Ben using. Homie was more than game on his one good leg and one new one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Between the 2 and 3, you can take her to your right, her left, by moving your hand by her left ear, palm down. She'll do the rest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Good. Do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The Major smiled at Homie as he executed the turn, and she smoothly came back around to face him instead. Now you can take her to your left, her right. This time, between the 2 and 3, you'll bring her hand up on the other side. Now your palm will be up. She'll do the rest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Try it now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Do it again, Homie. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This time the Major showed Homie how she would maintain the hand connection if he just held his hand the same way as she executed the turn. Now other soldiers, men and women, plus some women-women combinations, had joined them on the dance floor and were following Ben's instructions. Just then the Major's pager went off at her side. She glanced once, turned a silent excuse to Ben, and was out the door in a flash. The 2-block sprint back to Walter Reed front gate probably was covered in world record time as Ben and others came out on the sidewalk to watch. She could already hear the chopper landing on the lawn. Waving her badge, the guards gave her a wide berth, and she never broke step as she sprinted across the lawn into the hospital. 3 stretchers from the chopper followed her in close succession. Clapping their hands, Ben and the others came back inside, and Davita came out from behind the bar. Having witnessed the Major's quick exit, Davita took the Major's place as Ben's instructional partner. Old School had started back up his music after he'd come back in with the watchers on the sidewalk. While dancing, Davita said, "I hope those new boys or girls get over here in a few months. That'll mean the doc did okay tonight." So, those are some segments from my book, Forgetful. I'll probably have 1 or 2 more segments on my YouTube channel in the next week or so. There are a couple other stories I want to tell. Particularly, I want to give you a glimpse of the seminar on cross-cultural communication that Ben teaches at Howard University. Thank you for watching. If you've watched all 3, thank you even more for that. I'd love for you to follow me on Twitter. I try to make announcements if I'm going to be reading somewhere live or appearing at a book fair or some other event. On Twitter, it's at NMANNDC, at NMANDC. Would love for you, of course, to go online to either the BarnesandNoble.com site or the Amazon.com site and purchase a copy of the book. And if you do, I'd love to hear what you think about it. And again, you can communicate with me on Twitter at @NMannDC. Thank you again for watching, and enjoy your evening.